Dear friends, this year is Ignatian Year. May 20th, 2021, we begin, especially the Society of Jesus and the Ignatian family worldwide, the celebration of the Ignatian Year. Why Ignatian Year? Because on that date, 500 years ago, Ignatius was wounded by a cannonball while defending Pamplona. For him, it was a major failure and a change of his plans for the future, because he always dreamt a future of riches and worldly exploits. In fact, this cannonball led Ignatius to have a bigger dreams centered no longer on himself but on God. Arturo Sosa, our superior general, declaring this date as Ignatian Year, this year as Ignatian Year, he says, for Ignatius, a life of poverty was an expression of intimacy with Jesus. More than words, his poverty was a sign of his interior transformation, of his growing indifference to preparing himself to follow God's will, of his sense that everything came down from above as a gift. De arriba, he says. Everything is a gift from God. Now, when we look at St. Ignatius of Loyola, or rather Inigo's early life, he was born in the ancestor castle of Loyola's in the Basque province of Spain. He was the youngest of 13 children of a noble and wealthy family. His mother died when he was 7 years old. In 1506, Ignatius became a page in the service of a relative, Juan Velasquez. He was a treasurer of the kingdom of Castile. In 1517, Ignatius became a knight in the service of another relative, Antonio Manrique de Lara, Duke of Najara and Viceroy of Navarre, who employed him in military undertakings and on a diplomatic mission. So Ignatius was a military man. And as a result, what happened when he was a military man? He had to defend Pamplona from the enemies. And one such occasion, he defended Pamplona against the French. Ignatius was hit by a cannonball on May 20th, 1521, sustaining a bad fracture on his right leg. And it says that his left leg also was damaged. This event closed the first period of his life. Then on, a completely changed man was Ignatius. And in fact, childhood, Ignatius was known as Inigo, and now onwards Ignatius. That means the journey from Inigo to Ignatius happened because of the cannonball. He himself says, Ignatius says about this, his own experience, what type of a man he was. In his autobiography, number 1, you'll find, he says, he was a man given to the vanities of the world, whose chief delight consisted in martial exercises, with a great and vain desire for fame. Ignatius' moral was not very, very good. Ignatius was in his early years so proud rather than a sensual man. He stood just under 5 feet 2 inches in height and had in his youth an abundance of hair of a reddish tint. He delighted in music, especially sacred hymns. It is the second period of Ignatius' life in which he turned toward a saintly life. In fact, we know that Ignatius, who converted to a new life, much more than Ignatius previously. After treatment at Pamplona, Ignatius was transported to Loyola in June 1521. There his condition became so serious that for a time it was thought he would die. When out of danger, he chose to undergo painful surgery to correct the mistakes or the wrongdoings that happened on his bone. Again he asked, set it right. The result was a long period of convalescence, during which he read the life of Christ and the book on the lives of saints. Actually, these are the two books that was available in the castle. He also passed time in recalling tales of martial valor and in thinking of a great lady whom he admired. In the early stages of his enforced reading, his attention was centered on the saints. The version of the life of saints he was reading contained prologues of various lives of Cistercian monks who conceived the service of God as a holy chivalry. This view of life profoundly moved and attracted Ignatius. After much reflection, he resolved to imitate the holy austerities of the saints in order to do penance for his sins. 500 years ago, Saint Ignatius of Loyola experienced this event that changed his life. As I said, as a young soldier in the Spanish army, Ignatius dreamt of fame and glory. But now everything changed. Ignatius experienced a spiritual conversion and immediately decided to take a change. He found a new sense and a new purpose and set out to establish the Society of Jesus. If not for Ignatius's cannonball moment, we would not have hundreds of Jesuit colleges, universities, parishes, research centers, social action centers, cultural and communication centers, Jesuit refugee services, alumni organizations, or organizations that all serve to make the world a better place, a greater place. This year, all Jesuit work across the world will begin celebrating this year the 500th anniversary of Ignatius's cannonball moment, we call it. In fact, it's a transformative experience of a great saint. An ordinary man, ordinary young man to a great saint. Celebrations will conclude on the feast day of Ignatius on July 31st, 2022. We are celebrating this Ignatian year to commemorate this year a transformed Ignatius of Loyola forever and gave rise to the spirituality and the form of education that has shaped millions of people over the past 5 centuries. We must celebrate. And what can we do? This year is very special for us. All our associates, all our Ignatian family is a very, very important year. It invites us for personal conversion, transformation, institutional transformation. All Ignatian family must delve deeply into the cannonball experience of Ignatius and look at our own cannonball experience. What change has made in my life? Is there a turnaround in my life? That's what we need to discuss. We need to discern what transformation it brings in my life and the life of our institutions, for example. Now, when we look at Ignatius, there are a few points for us to remember that will help us to have to delve into our own cannonball experiences. First of all, Ignatius was always looked for the greater glory of God. He was a man who gave the first place to God above everything. Second, Ignatius had always a union with Jesus, union with God. He emphasized an ardent love for the Savior. He also had self-awareness, no? So much of self-awareness. That's why Ignatius recommends that twice a day we all need to have the daily examen. In fact, it gives us a spiritual direction, a new orientation in our life. And he also brought meditation and contemplation for the change of people. And he himself guided through spiritual exercises. This. He also asked for all of us to have a detachment. It is very important to have. We are bound to have attachment to properties, to places, to people, to things. Francis of Assisi's concept of poverty emphasized the spiritual benefits of simplicity and dependency. Ignatius emphasized detachment, or what we call indifference. And he says in spiritual exercises, where it's a long life or a short life, whether it's a healthy life or a sickly life, whether it is rich or poverty, we need to be balanced. And he also insists upon prayer and efforts at self-conquest. The spiritual exercise of Ignatius actually is a fruit of his own prayer life. He had tremendous devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and the Eucharist and to Our Lady. And Ignatius always worked, he always said, no, greater glory of God and the greater good of God's people. In fact, the purpose of the Society of Jesus says, the summary of the constitutions, he says, it's not only to apply one's life to one's own salvation and to perfection with the help of divine grace, but to employ all one's strength for the salvation and perfection of one's neighbor. That is why we cannot go to heaven alone. That's the concept of Ignatius. We need to work together and take everybody along. That means to create a conducive atmosphere for people to have this transformation, people to have this God experience. That is what our mission is. And therefore, Ignatius brings another important concept, which is called finding God in all things. The vision that Ignatius places at the beginning of the exercises keeps sight of both the creator and the creature, the one and the other, stepped along the same movement of love. It is something very important for us to remember. And I said examination of conscience. It's a very important concept Ignatius gives us. And he insists upon on all Jesuits and others to have twice a day the examination of conscience. And he says the examination of consciousness is a simple prayer directed towards developing a spiritual sensitivity to the special ways God approaches, invites, and calls. Ignatius recommends that the examen be done in at least 2 times a day and suggests 5 points for prayer. Recalling that one is in the presence of God, thanking God for all the blessings one has received, examining how one has lived the day, asking God for forgiveness for the mistakes, resolution, and offering a prayer of hopeful commitment. This is what. And another area, Ignatius, his contribution after his conversion, this cannonball experience, he gives the entire humanity is the discernment. Discernment is rooted in the understanding that God is ever at work in one's life, inviting, directing, guiding, and drawing one into the fullness of life. And therefore, Ignatius says, through proper discernment, we must serve the humanity. He emphasized the active expression of God's love in life is in need to be self-forgetful in humility. And therefore Ignatius says, love is not in words but in deeds. And therefore, my dear friends, the Ignatian year presents an opportunity for personal and communitarian transformation. We can invite our students to go from profession to purpose, to make a deeper reflection of their talents, their passions, and the world's greatest needs as we accompany them on the path of finding their vocation. In this Ignatian year, we invite you to organize programs and initiates the programs this invitation to a deeper reflection as a hallmark of Jesuit education. Remember, our institutions has two aspects. Our institutions as a container, in fact. The content is the purpose. And therefore, without content, the container is meaningless. Therefore, this year will enable us to go deeply and have that content uh, to be filled in the container. Wish you all a very, very happy Ignatian year. Let's all ask the Lord to give that grace for the needed transformation in our lives. Happy Ignatian year. Thank you very much, and God bless all of us.